So in the case of the Laurel Creek project, what I did was I imported the PDRI assessment that CII used into the CARV tool, which took me about 40 seconds considering the amount of data that was in that particular file. The discussion with Jerry and his VP started with a look at the overall PDRI score. I explained that PDRI is like a golf score in that the lower the score, the better the score. A higher score means you have higher risk. What was unusual about this project was just how low it scored compared to recommended ranges by CII in front-end planning 2 phase, which we refer to here as PDRI 2. And that this range is represented here actually in this particular control and CARV by this gray bar right here as industry. We normally expect to see for front-end planning 2 a project score between 450 and 600 at this stage. So before meeting with Jerry and his VP, I did talk to the Houston project director and asked him if he'd be willing to share his PDRI metrics and scoring so that I could compare it with the Calgary team, given that this was the only project that we had done a PDRI in Calgary. What I did was I changed the oil sands project portfolio and did a comparison with the Houston project portfolio, which I'll bring up for you now. Houston had been using actually PDRI for about 3 years, so they had some good comparison metrics to compare the Laurel Creek project with. And we're all comparing the same phase, PDRI 2 here. Jerry's VP agreed to take a closer look at the PDRI results by comparing that project, and this is represented here in this screen. What happened when I brought this up, the guys immediately leaned in because the Laurel Creek project appeared in green, and the score was significantly lower than the other projects. So this must look really good, right? So we decided to take a closer look and drill down into the assessment results for PDRI 2 and Laurel Creek. So we quickly got to the highlights of the PDRI session findings, and the score was very low, but in fact too low. As you can see here with the project score compared for the portfolio score of the Houston projects and the industry range expected. During the session, the team identified a major gap related to demobilization requirements that came as a result of regulator changes to those requirements. Although a substantial amount of work, design work, had been completed, rework is anticipated resulting from changes in these design criteria. Some of the team realized that for concept phase, actually too much design work had been done. And in this particular case, more was just more, because what was done actually too soon in the project. If we take a look at the action items that resulted, the team identified a specific number of action items for follow-up. The most important was that the design criteria needed to be revisited to cover the demobilization requirements change. Jerry asked if he could get a copy of these action items to incorporate into the master action items list, and in using our export feature, we easily exported the action items for him. Then we wanted to take a look at the low definition elements and actually look how they compared with the portfolio average. So given it was a PDRI 2, I only included elements identified as major gaps by the team. Most of the low definition items were in line with those that the Houston team sees at the same stage. And you can see that by the score that the Laurel Creek scored with the portfolio average for these same scores. The one exception here was the element D2 right here, the project design criteria, where Laurel Creek was scoring higher than the portfolio average. The next question the VP asked me was, were all the discipline leads present? We decided to take a look at the attendees. Indeed, I shared this, and they all were there, but we didn't have anyone from regulatory. Next, we took a step back to take a look at the bigger picture and look at all of the sections in one particular visualized screen. This view allowed us to quickly see visually where the most risk resided. So I remind you that low score is a good score generally, but we noted for this particular concept phase, there were some particularly low scoring pieces. So we could look at each of the individual scores for the section at the top and then graphically represent it below. I was really surprised by the amount of design work that had been completed at this stage, and it was helpful to compare it with the Houston portfolio at this point. So if you look here, if we look at the design, the project score was at 132, and the portfolio score was significantly higher, and the CII range tolerance for that was in fact much higher. We drilled down then into the basis of design so I could better explain where my concerns came from. Equipment scope was an easy one to pinpoint, and we could see here that it scored very low, and in fact, less than 1/5 of the score of the portfolio average. Equipment scope, on instrumentation and electrical, it showed actually the same trend. And the very next question from the VP was, so if we end up making changes in the design criteria in the next few weeks, what do you figure the impact will be on our design work to date? Jerry quickly shared that he figured the project would end up doing rework on a number of the design elements. We were about 10 minutes into our 1-hour scheduled meeting when the VP stopped me. And he said to Jerry, you know, Jerry, this has been a really insightful discussion. I get your concerns. I understand your concerns much better having seen this. Have you shared this with the Director of Engineering yet? Jerry hadn't. So we quickly decided to send this off to the project director, and share it. The VP's mind was clearly racing at this point, and he asked me if I could get a PDF version, if he could get a PDF version of this for his executive meeting at the end of the week. This was an easy request, and we created the PDF and walked him through the content. So the PDF file actually is produced quite easily from Carve and is a good representation of what we've just seen in the Carve tool itself. And the low definition elements can be seen here as well. And finally, to access the report online, if everyone in the meeting had a Carve account, they could easily access that report online.